At dawn in early May 1942, Lieutenant J.G. Harlan Rocky Dixon is seated in the cockpit of an SBD Dauntless on the flight deck of USS Yorktown CV-5. He is strapped in. The canopy is open. His hands are already stiff inside salt-crusted gloves. The bomb under the belly of the aircraft has been hung and checked. The pins are still in. The engine is warm, but not turning fast enough to matter. The deck is alive, but not loud yet. This is the quiet phase, the interval when nothing has gone wrong and nothing has begun. Dixon has been awake for hours. Everyone has. The night never fully gives the ship back to morning. It only thins. Red lights fade, shapes sharpen, the horizon becomes a line instead of a suggestion. Men move around him with practiced efficiency, close enough that he can smell oil and sweat through the open cockpit. They never touch him unless required. They know where to and where not to stand. The deck is narrow. It always is. The ocean surrounds it on every side, flat and indifferent, waiting for whatever falls short. The aircraft does not belong to Dixon alone. It belongs to the men crouched beneath it, the ones who loaded the bomb, connected the arming wires, checked the sway braces by feel, because they could do it in the dark. It belongs to the man who signals with his hands, not looking at Dixon's face, but at the wheels, the flaps, the edges of metal that will betray a mistake before a man does. It belongs to the crew who fueled it hours ago, counting gallons, already aware that every extra pound trades climb for range, and every missing pound trades range for survival. No one talks about where they are going. They all know the general shape of it, somewhere to the west, somewhere beyond what the eye can reach from the deck, somewhere far enough that fuel matters, and close enough that turning back too early will mean missing the fight entirely. The briefings were short. The information was incomplete. That is normal now. It has been normal since December. Dixon looks straight ahead, not because there's anything to see, but because looking around gives the hands too much time to notice themselves. The Dauntless vibrates faintly, restrained, like an animal aware of the edge of its tether. Heat rolls up from the engine cowling and mixes with exhaust and sea air. Sweat forms, dries, forms again. Time stretches in small, stubborn increments measured by nothing visible. No clock face is close enough to read. You feel the minutes instead. Around him, men find reasons to be busy. A final inspection that does not discover anything new. A hand wiping a surface that will be dirty again before the aircraft leaves the deck. A glance at the horizon held a second too long, as if it might explain itself. These are not superstitions. They are pressure valves. Everyone knows it. No one comments. Dixon has flown enough carrier landings to understand that the ocean is not scenery. It is consequence. It does not care how good the takeoff looked or how clean the dive felt. It waits for misjudgment measured in seconds and feet. He knows this. He does not dwell on it. Dwelling would require imagination. Imagination has no place here yet. A signal flag moves, another answers. Somewhere below, engines are being brought up to speed. The sound grows, layered and uneven, not yet the solid roar that will flatten everything else. The deck crew shifts subtly, bodies angling toward what comes next. The choreography tightens. The pins will come out soon. Once they do, the aircraft is no longer safe in the same way. It becomes a commitment. Out beyond the edge of the deck, the enemy is also awake. Dixon cannot see them. He does not know their exact position, only that they are out there doing the same arithmetic with fuel and distance, performing their own rituals of waiting. That knowledge exists without detail, which makes it heavier. Somewhere, other men are strapped into other aircraft, hands steady, eyes forward, engines warming. The symmetry does not make it fair. Dixon rolls his shoulders once inside the harness. The straps bite and settle. The machine is ready before he is, and that is as it should be. When the signal finally comes, he will not have to decide whether to go. The decision has already been distributed across the deck, across the ship, across hours of labor that cannot be undone. Stopping now would mean thinking. Thinking would mean hearing the questions underneath. The only thing required of him at this moment is to stay still and wait for the noise to become everything. For a brief moment, nothing moves. What the men aboard the carrier are told is simple enough to repeat and thin enough to leave space around it. There are Japanese carriers somewhere to the northwest. They are moving with purpose. That purpose involves Port Moresby. If Port Moresby falls, The map changes in ways that will not be easily reversed. The task is to find those carriers and stop them. What they are not told is where, exactly, the enemy is at this moment. Bearing shift. Reports arrive late, garbled, or secondhand. The ocean is wide, and aircraft can only be in so many places at once. This is not ignorance so much as structure. Everyone involved understands that decisions will be made without certainty. The briefings do not pretend otherwise. Dixon listens with the rest of them, standing with his flight helmet under his arm. The smell of fuel and canvas already clings to him. He takes notes because that is what officers do. He also knows most of what matters will not be written down. The distances matter. The fuel margins matter more. The rest is noise that will be filtered out by circumstance once he is airborne. The language of the briefing is careful. No one says battle yet. They talk about contacts, possibilities, windows. They talk about timing in hours rather than minutes, even though everyone knows the final decisions will be made in seconds. The enemy is described as capable and determined. That is another way of saying that underestimating them has already cost lives elsewhere. No adjectives beyond that are needed. Around Dixon, men absorb the same information and process it differently. Some ask questions about headings and rendezvous points. Some do not ask anything at all. The deck crews are not present for this part. They do not need to be. Their work does not change based on where the enemy might be. An aircraft must be fueled and armed the same way, whether it flies into empty ocean or toward another carrier's air group. The origin of this moment stretches back months, but aboard the ship it collapses into a narrow slice of time. The men know Pearl Harbor happened. They know the Philippines fell. They know the Japanese have been advancing faster than anyone expected. That knowledge exists as background pressure, not narrative. No one is thinking in terms of history. They are thinking in terms of what will be required of them before the day is over. For Dixon, this is not his first operation. It is, however, his first time flying against an enemy that might be flying directly back at him from a carrier deck of their own. The distinction matters. It means success will not be measured only by what he hits, but by what survives to come after him. He understands that in theory. In practice, his responsibility remains unchanged. Fly the aircraft. Follow orders as given. Put the bomb where directed if the opportunity presents itself. Return if fuel allows. There is a gap between command intent and pilot reality that no amount of briefing can close. Orders describe objectives. Pilots experience weather, vibration, glare, radiostatic, and the constant subtraction of fuel from a finite supply. The men giving the orders know this. The men receiving them know it too. The gap is not a failure of communication. It is the cost of operating at distance. When the briefing ends, there is no speech about what this means. Men stand. Gear is adjusted. People move back toward assigned spaces. The carrier does not pause to let information settle. It never does. Somewhere below decks, engines are already being brought online. Ordnance crews are already moving. The ship has committed to action before every man aboard has fully processed why. Dixon walks back toward the ready area with the rest of his flight. He does not talk much. There is nothing to add. The mission will clarify itself later, in fragments, when it is too late to change it. For now, the reason they are here is sufficient. The enemy is moving. If no one meets them, the consequences will belong to someone else. No more explanation is required. Before the aircraft move, the ship moves people. It does this without ceremony and without pause. Men emerge from compartments and ladders carrying tools and responsibilities that will not be mentioned in any report once the day is over. The flight deck is not yet loud enough to erase individual sounds. You hear boots on steel, shouted confirmations, the scrape of metal fittings being seated and checked again. The deck crews work in teams that overlap without getting in each other's way. They learn this by repetition, not instruction. Ordnance men move beneath the aircraft, crouched low, handling explosives with the same motions they would use for ballast or cargo. The bomb slung under Dixon's Dauntless is heavy enough to matter and dangerous enough to demand attention. It is not treated as special. Special treatment introduces error. The arming wires are checked by feel. Fingers trace familiar paths along metal already warm from the rising day. Fueling crews have been at work since before dawn. They counted gallons in the dark, marking numbers that will later translate into minutes in the air. They know too much fuel makes takeoff longer and riskier. They know too little turns a successful mission into a slow descent toward the sea. There is no perfect number. Only the best compromise available with the information at hand. Signalmen stand where they must be seen, flags ready, eyes scanning the deck and the edges beyond it. Their job is to translate intent into motion using gestures that cannot be mistaken even when exhaust and glare flatten depth and distance. A wrong signal does not injure the man who gives it. It injures someone else. Everyone understands this. The ship itself participates in the labor. The deck flexes slightly under the combined weight of aircraft and men. The wind over the bow is adjusted to give the planes the best possible chance of lifting cleanly. Engines below decks hum and thrum, feeding power to systems most of the men above never see. The carrier is not a backdrop, it is an active component. Dixon sits above all of this, literally and figuratively removed, but not separate. He feels the aircraft being touched and adjusted beneath him. He hears shouted confirmations not meant for him but reassuring anyway. He does not interfere. Pilots learn early that hovering attention creates distraction. Trust is not courtesy, it is requirement. Mistakes are avoided not because no one makes them, but because they are caught early. A pen that does not seek correctly, a line that snags and is freed. A signal repeated until acknowledged. Each correction costs seconds. Seconds are absorbed without comment. No one rushes to make up time. Rushing creates different problems. Those problems are harder to fix. Sweat becomes part of the environment. The sun climbs. Heat builds in steel and machinery. Men wipe faces with forearms, careful not to smear grease where it might matter. Shirts darken. Gloves stiffen as salt dries into them. The sensory load builds steadily until it becomes another layer of interference to work through. This labor will not be visible once the aircraft leave the deck. No one in the air will see it. No one below decks will hear the specific movements that made the launch possible. But without it, the moment of violence that follows would not exist. The deck crews understand this. It is not pride, it is fact. Their role is to make departure inevitable and recovery possible. Everything in between belongs to someone else. When the time comes, the pins are pulled. The aircraft are no longer safe to linger beside. The deck narrows, not physically but functionally, until it becomes a corridor with no tolerance for hesitation. Until that instant, the men keep working, repeating motions practiced into reliability. Once the engines come up to full power, the ship has no use for uncertainty. The moment arrives without announcement. There is no clean line between preparation and action, only a shift in tempo that everyone on the deck feels at the same time. Engines rise, noise thickens. Individual sounds lose definition and collapse into a single force that presses against the body. Conversation becomes impossible. From this point forward, communication is reduced to hand signals and eye contact. Anything more would be lost. The first aircraft is moved into position. The deck that had been a workspace becomes a launch corridor measured in feet and inches. Men step back exactly as far as required and no farther. They know where the prop arcs will be. They know where not to stand. They learn this by repetition and by watching what happens to those who misjudge it. Dixon feels the dauntless tense as the engine reaches full power. The vibration changes pitch and intensity, a physical confirmation that the machine is ready whether he is or not. He fixes his eyes on the narrow strip of deck ahead of him and on the man who will tell him when to release the brakes. Everything else recedes. The signal comes. Dixon releases. The aircraft lunges forward, acceleration pressing him back into the seat. The deck rushes beneath him faster than feels reasonable. The end of the carrier approaches without compromise. There is no gradual transition. One moment there is steel under the wheels. The next, there is nothing. The aircraft drops before it climbs. It always does. The fraction of a second is long enough to register and short enough to deny reaction. Then lift takes hold. The Dauntless claws upward, slow and heavy with fuel and ordnance. Dixon holds it steady, resisting the urge to pull too hard. He knows the numbers. He knows what the aircraft will tolerate. Exceeding them would solve nothing. Behind him, another aircraft moves into position. Then another, each one consuming deck space, fuel, and attention. The men who remain on deck watch until they are forced to turn away and prepare for the next one. There is no ceremony. There is no waving. The work does not allow for it. Once airborne, Dixon settles into formation with the rest of his flight. The carrier recedes quickly, shrinking until it becomes shape rather than place. In minutes, it disappears entirely. That is expected. The ship is not meant to be a reference point. It is meant to be left behind. The radio crackles intermittently. Call signs are exchanged. Positions confirmed. There is more static than voice, more interference than clarity. Dixon listens carefully, filtering what matters from what does not. He does not expect perfect information. He expects enough. Below him, the ocean stretches in every direction, featureless and bright. Sun glare flattens depth and distance until altitude becomes something trusted to instruments rather than perception. He checks them, then checks them again. Fuel gauges, engine temperatures, airspeed. The numbers are stable for now. As the formation settles onto its outbound leg, commitment asserts itself. Turning back is no longer something to be considered lightly. Every mile flown outward thins the margin in ways the gauges no longer hide. This is not fear. It is constraint made physical. The men in the air understand it instinctively, the way deck crews understand spacing. It does not require explanation. Somewhere behind them, aboard the carrier, the deck crews return to the same motions without reference to what has just occurred. Equipment is secured, debris cleared. Recovery preparations begin. The ship does not wait to learn which aircraft will return intact. It assumes both possibilities at once. In the air, time stretches differently than it did on the deck. Minutes pass without interruption, and that absence begins to define the problem. Engines hold their rhythm. Formation holds. Dixon scans sky and water for anything that does not belong. There is nothing. The absence itself presses inward, narrowing options rather than widening them. The aircraft press on, carrying their pilots farther from the point where decisions can be reversed. The launch is complete. What follows is already in motion. Before we go any farther, if you're finding yourself drawn into this story, we'd love it if you subscribed. It helps us keep making work like this. All right, let's continue. Once the carrier disappears behind them, the flight settles into a rhythm that is both familiar and misleading. The engine noise becomes constant enough to fade. The vibration evens out into something the body can absorb without conscious effort. This is the phase where nothing presents itself, and where that non-appearance begins to shape the problem more forcefully than contact would. Dixon's eyes never stop moving. He checks position. Then instruments, then sky, then water. Each pass takes seconds. The sequence repeats without pause. He does this not because he expects change, but because waiting for change is how things are missed. You find what matters by looking before it demands attention. Fuel asserts itself again, no longer as arithmetic, but as presence. The gauge moves slowly enough to invite complacency. Dixon does not accept the invitation. Time draws directly from what remains. Wind and altitude complicate estimates that will never settle into certainty. This is not anticipation. It is maintenance continuous, unglamorous, necessary. The formation holds. Spacing is deliberate. Close enough for mutual support. Far enough to prevent one failure from becoming several. No one corrects anyone else unless correction is required. Silence remains preferred. When someone speaks, it carries weight. The sky stays empty in a way that feels deliberate. No clouds break the glare. The ocean reflects the sun until texture disappears and depth becomes unreliable. Dixon cycles trust instrument, training, instrument, without assigning loyalty to any single sense. Time passes without interruption. That fact presses inward. The outbound leg consumes minutes that feel longer than the launch itself. Flying becomes a way of holding mental position as much as physical one. Thoughts surface and dissolve without anchoring. He does not rehearse outcomes. He does not imagine reactions. None of that can be acted on yet. The radio breaks the silence in fragments. Bearings, altitudes, partial sightings that collapse into static before coherence can form. Dixon absorbs them without weight. Premature certainty closes options. Restraint keeps them open. The physical strain never leaves. Harness pressure. Rising heat. Salt drying on skin. He adjusts grip carefully, resisting over-control. The Dauntless responds with the predictability it was built to provide. Reliability defines the limit. It does not erase risk. As distance from the carrier increases, separation from immediate support becomes complete. There is no diversion field, no margin for negotiation if something fails. The knowledge does not intrude. It occupies its place. Somewhere ahead, beyond the horizon, other aircraft are also moving. Other pilots are solving adjacent problems with different numbers. Dixon does not need to see them to feel the pressure of simultaneity. The war applies force through timing as much as through violence. Nothing has happened yet. The longer that remains true, the more that absence defines what comes next. The change arrives without emphasis. A shape appears where glare should be uninterrupted. Too regular to be cloud. Too stable to be reflection. Dixon confirms through motion, then relation to the horizon. When it holds, he commits. Voices overlap on the radio. Bearings called. Altitudes adjusted. The formation tightens without instruction. Contact does not bring relief. It compresses the problem. Dixon adds power. Eases the nose down. The aircraft ahead banks and he follows, preserving spacing without thought. Distance collapses in stages, hulls, wakes, then movement too small to isolate but unmistakably human. Instructions arrive incomplete and out of sequence. Some repeat, some contradict. Dixon listens for applicability and discards the rest. Clarity does not arrive whole. It is assembled while moving. When the order to attack comes, it does not announce itself as a beginning. It removes delay. Dixon checks altitude, airspeed, sun angle. He selects his target by silhouette and motion, not designation. Training narrows attention to sequence. He rolls into the dive. The horizon vanishes. Vertical motion replaces it. Wind hammers the canopy. Vibration sharpens as gravity and speed converge. Dixon corrects only what must be corrected. Precision comes from restraint. Anti-aircraft fire begins scattered and grows dense. Blackbursts bloom around the aircraft. Some jar it. Others fade into irrelevance. The noise loses direction. Impacts strike non-essential surfaces. Dixon does not look for damage. Distraction is costlier than ignorance. The release point arrives. He triggers without pause. The bomb separates cleanly. The aircraft responds immediately, lighter, more willing. The dive continues a fraction longer, then Dixon pulls hard. Force presses him into the seat as the Dauntless claws upward. The target drops away unseen. He levels off and scans. Threats. Aircraft. Changes in airspace. Smoke rises below, but smoke confirms nothing. Fire is easy. Damage is not. Reports flood the radio. Hits claimed. Hits questioned. Warnings interrupt confirmations. Dixon maintains airspeed and separation. The engagement does not pause for interpretation. Within minutes, the formation thins. Aircraft peel away to reform, escape, pursue secondary opportunities. Dixon checks fuel again. The margin has thinned in ways the gauges no longer hide. Whatever has been accomplished must justify the distance already flown. When ordered to withdraw, he turns without hesitation. Proximity is exchanged for distance again. Distance erases detail. Contact ends. Something else takes its place. The flight back is quieter, but it is not calm. Engines settle into cruise power. The airspace between aircraft opens slightly as formations loosen. Damage, if it exists, announces itself now in subtler ways. A vibration that was not there before, a control that feels heavier than it should, an instrument that hesitates before settling. Each pilot conducts his own inventory. Dixon works through the checks in order. Control response, engine temperature, oil pressure, fuel. He does not look back toward where the ship should be. There is nothing there that will help him reach the carrier. Radio traffic thins as distance grows. Reports shorten. Precision dissolves. One voice suggests a carrier has been hit hard. Another doubts it. No one resolves the disagreement. From here, certainty is unavailable. Pretending otherwise would only distort the next decision. Fuel asserts itself again, no longer as calculation, but as draw. Each minute inward eases the pressure slightly, but the relief is conditional. Nothing remains that can be bargained with. The carrier does not appear when expected. The ocean offers no markers, only glare and repetition. Dixon widens his search pattern, scanning for geometry that does not belong to water. This delay is familiar. The ship is always harder to find than memory suggests. When USS Yorktown finally resolves out of the brightness, it does so without drama. A dark shape moving steadily, indifferent to how much attention it has demanded. Relief arrives slowly. Landing remains. The ship turns into the wind. Deck lights cut through glare and shadow, signaling order rather than invitation. The recovery pattern forms overhead, aircraft stacking vertically instead of spreading laterally. The sky tightens again. Dixon enters the pattern and reduces power. Altered fatigue, fuel imbalance, hours of vibration leaving their trace. He follows deck signals without question. The man below sees what he cannot. The descent steepens. The deck rises fast. The arresting wire catches. Motion stops. Dixon remains seated, hands still on the controls, letting breath return. Then the canopy opens, and heat, noise, and shouted instructions rush in. Men are already at the wheels, already making the aircraft safe. The transition is immediate and impersonal. Aircraft continue to land. Some trail smoke. Some arrive with margins collapsed into urgency. Some do not arrive at all. The deck adjusts without pause. Dixon steps down onto steel. His legs feel unreliable, not fear, but the absence of motion. He looks along the line of parked aircraft and notes the gaps. He does not ask where the missing ones are. The ship will answer in its own time. Debriefing begins quickly and ends just as fast. Dixon reports only what he directly observed. Approach, dive, release, pull out. He does not speculate. Accuracy requires narrowness. Other pilots contribute fragments. Timelines overlap imperfectly. Altitudes blur. Headings diverge. These inconsistencies are recorded without comment. Truth arrives in pieces. They rarely align at first. Deck work resumes immediately. Aircraft are shifted, inspected, patched where possible. Fuel hoses reappear. Ordnance is restaged. Hands return to the same motions, indifferent to outcome. The deck does not record what it enabled. Absence becomes visible gradually. An empty space where an aircraft should be. Gear, left behind without explanation. These gaps outline themselves without announcement, meaning will come later, or it will not. Information continues to arrive from beyond the horizon. Other carriers report their own engagements, their own damage, their own uncertainty. The picture expands without clarifying. Each edition enlarges what is known while leaving the center unresolved. By late afternoon, the ship operates on what can be acted on rather than what can be proven. Combat air patrols adjust. Fuel reserves recalculated. Course changes remain incremental. Decisions proceed without waiting for agreement. Dixon remains near his aircraft, assisting where needed. Conversation stays minimal. Speculation offers no advantage. Silence conserves attention. As daylight thins, understanding settles in. The enemy's immediate plan has been disrupted. The evidence is incomplete. The effect is real. The map will not look the same tomorrow, even if no one aboard can yet say how. The carrier maintains speed and readiness into the evening. Whatever has been decided during the day does not release the ship from preparation. Motion continues. Watches rotate. Night replaces visibility with structure. Deck lights carve usable fragments out of darkness, dense enough to feel physical. The ship moves through it steadily. Work continues with reduced volume and unchanged precision. Aircraft that can fly are inspected again. Those that cannot are stripped or shifted aside. Ordnance is checked. Fuel topped off where possible. Fatigue alters judgment in small ways. Everyone compensates by slowing motions rather than rushing them. Dixon lies down when directed, not because rest feels earned, but because opportunity exists. The compartment is crowded. Air circulates poorly. Men settle into bunks or onto steel decking. The ship's movement transmits itself upward through structure into muscle and bone. Sleep arrives in fragments. Shallow, easily broken. Engine pitch changes. Footsteps. A door closing too hard. Dixon wakes, checks his watch, then realizes the time displayed no longer corresponds to anything useful. Time aboard has been reduced to readiness states. Those who remain awake move deliberately. Speech stays functional. A question, an answer, nothing more. Conversation invites speculation. Speculation expends energy. Somewhere aboard, lists are compiled. Missing aircraft accounted for. Administrative processes begin their slow, parallel progression. Loss exists. It has not yet been given space. The ship holds course. The possibility of renewed contact remains abstract but persistent. It prevents full rest without demanding full alertness. Morning comes without ceremony. Exhaustion feels cumulative rather than resolved. Men continue because continuation is embedded in the system they occupy. Readiness is not a feeling. It is a condition imposed. In later years, when the Coral Sea acquires definition and boundary, Dixon will remember it as physical constraint rather than conclusion. The weight of the aircraft at launch, the narrowing of the deck under power, the dive compressing time and space into forward motion. These memories persist without aligning themselves to victory or defeat. The war moves on, indifferent to which moments lodge most firmly. USS Yorktown does not survive in the same way. Weeks later at Midway, it is struck, damaged, stabilized by labor indistinguishable from what occurred in the Coral Sea, and then lost. The platform disappears. The system continues. Carrier aviation evolves. Procedures harden into doctrine. Aircraft change. Radios improve. Manuals codify what to do and when. None of that removes the central condition: people making decisions with incomplete information under physical strain. The shape of the problem adapts. The pressure remains. The Coral Sea is later described as a turning point. The first naval battle fought entirely by aircraft, fleets destroying one another without ever coming into sight. This is accurate as description. It does not account for the waiting. It does not record men loading bombs before dawn or watching empty sky until fuel forced return. It does not reflect how little anyone aboard understood at the time what had shifted. What persists instead are quieter inheritances. Training that assumes distance. Deck procedures built around speed and repetition. A professional expectation that uncertainty is managed rather than eliminated. These legacies do not announce themselves. They simply operate. Dixon does not spend the rest of his life interpreting the Coral Sea. He does not need to. What he did has been absorbed into structures that function without reference to his name. When asked, he speaks plainly about what he saw and what he did and leaves the rest untouched. That restraint is not modesty, it is fidelity. At dawn on carriers that follow, the deck still looks the same. Aircraft aligned. Men moving with purpose. Engines warming. Someone seated in a cockpit, hands steady, waiting for the signal that converts preparation into commitment. The ocean still waits beyond the deck edge, unchanged. Ready to take whatever misjudges the margin. That condition endures, and that's where we'll leave it. Thanks for watching. If these stories mean something to you, subscribe. If you haven't already, it helps this channel keep such amazing people's actions alive. Comment to let us know you enjoyed the tale. Tell us, if you have a family member who served in similar situations, we'd love to hear their story. See you next time.